Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to continue further on Introduction to Web Designing using HTML. Dear friends, we have conducted 2 sessions on the following topic, and today also we are going to discuss the topic in detail and are going to understand the other concepts, other elements of web designing using HTML. And for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj. Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj is Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science, Jesus and Mary College, University of Delhi. Dr. Bharadwaj is a prolific professor and she puts her 100% in delivering lectures for you. She believes in giving her maximum knowledge to you. So let's take advantages from her experiences and from her hard work, and let's try to understand web designing using HTML. Hello ma'am, welcome to the lecture.
Good afternoon. In continuation with our previous 2 lectures, today again we are going to talk about the process of designing websites using HTML. So we have already discussed the concept that internet basically works on a client-server model, and websites which work on client-server models, they need to be actually developed on 2 phases. One is the client end, where we develop it using HTML, the client-side programming, and the server-side programming is done using other tools such as PHP or servlets, etc., where you design the databases and you design the logic of programming the interface or programming the data which is collected from the users. So basically we had seen that HTML is used for developing the client side view of the website. What the user will see when he or she opens your website is designed using HTML. So we have seen that a web page which is designed using HTML has a lot of different types of versions of informations, or we can say different media are used for putting up a website or creating a visual experience for the user. So we have seen that we use a large number of colors, we use different color schemes, we can use a variety of fonts. Then we can use different formatting like aligning of text, aligning of images, and we have seen in the previous lecture about a very crucial element, that is hyperlinking. That is how you can connect to web pages. Then in the last part of the lecture we were talking about tables, and we had seen how tables can be designed. So the purpose of tables, as I discussed earlier also, is not just to show a grid wise arrangement of data, like to show the data in rows and columns only, but it also can be a very important tool for aligning the various elements on a web page. So we can create a table, and with the help of that table we can place objects within on the web page, and we do not have to worry much about the alignment of those objects if we have a table. So we had discussed what are the important tags that we use before we design a table. Like the most important tag, the first tag to show that you want to draw a table is the table tag. Then to define the rows you write the TR, or if you want a heading you say the TH, and if you want the table data for a TD tag, that will design the data, or that will show you the columns of the table. So in continuation now we will talk about another important aspect of the table, that is, it is not essential that a table will always have a text type of data only. The data inside a table could be an image, or it could be a hyperlink, or it could be another table also. So this example here shows you that in this case we have seen that table data we are putting image src is equal to, and we are putting the name or the URL of the image. So you can see that between td and /td tags we have put an image file. So we have put an image file. So to put an image file, the tag which is used, or the HTML element which is used, is the img element. So this will insert the image, and you can see in the next cell we have put a hyperlink. So you can see in between the TD and the closing TD tag I have inserted a hyperlink using the A a href tag, and I have specified that this link. So whenever this lesson 1 will be clicked, the lesson1.ppt file will open. Important thing to note here is that this table does not have a border. So you can see I have only given table in the first line of the coding. I have written table and I have only given a cell spacing and cell padding, because I have not used the word border, therefore no border is coming. So it becomes a very different experience and you can align the objects using this kind of a scenario. This is just an example for the same. Next we will talk about nested tables. So as I was just saying, that a table may not only have the data within a table, but it can also have another table. So this type of a structure is known as nesting of tables, that is TD, and in between the TD and the /TD you can use a table tag. So here you can see in this example I am using the table element, and in this table element I have specified in the first row a contact, and in the second cell I have put another table tag, and in this table tag there is another table which I am using. So I am defining TR and /TR. So you can see here that how this table is actually containing another table. So this is known as a nesting of the tables, or this is also known as tables within the tables. So another example of the same nesting of tables is this in front of you. This is a little more complicated table which I have put inside the other table. Now this actually is looking as if a text box has been created in which a table is put, and another description about the table has been put here. But in reality, if I will show you the code, you will notice that this is also an example of nesting of tables. So actually there is one outer table, and then inside that outer table I have put, this outer table is actually having only one row, and the first column or the first cell of the row is a table and the second cell has a description. So if we will have the look at the coding of this, you can see here the first table, the first line reads table border is 10, because that is a thick border which is used here. And then we have the first row, that is TR. The first element, that is TD, is actually a table. So this table has a border of 5, and then I have put an image there and the name has been put and the description etc. is coming. Then you can see that this table closes and the next cell of the first of the only row in the outer table is the description. So then this cell closes and the TR row closes. So here you can see that this way you can align, or you can express, or you can show your data in a very effective way if you are using tables to put in images or to put in hyperlinks, or if you are using tables to create another table within a table. So this can create a very rich web experience. This can divide your web page and the user will find it very appealing to see different components, images, links etc. which are aligned very well using the structure of the tables. Then besides this, for semantic purposes, sometimes you will see that tables have been divided or sections of the table have been done. For example, we divide, any document is divided as header, the main body and the footer. Similarly, in case of table also, we can define 3 sections of the table, that is the header section, table header, or table body, and then table footer. But it is very important to understand that this kind of a bifurcation or grouping of cells within the table is only for a semantic purpose, but actually these tags will not show any effect on the outcome. So this is only for the user to understand that this particular row is the heading row and then there is a footer row, and the rest of the table fall, that is between the header and the footer, will fall under the body of the row. So you can see here in this example also, I have put the tag T head and T body and T foot. It is important to note here that all the 3 T head, T body and T foot tag, these are empty tags, and these need not be closed. So I put the first row as the header row. So I am putting TH there. The rest of the T body and the T foot rows I am putting TD. But now if I will show you the outcome of this coding, you can see this. Actually you can see here that there is no difference if for a user, if you see header 1 and header 2 is appearing in the center, that is because of the use of the TH element. Other than that, there is no difference. So this is only for an understanding of the designer, for a semantic clarity of the designer, that we create such a subgrouping of rows within a table. So you can use T head, T body and T foot for the same purpose. Then table borders or the grid lines that we see within a table are also an important element, and sometimes we would like these grid lines to appear in different formats or in different ways. Sometimes we want that the grid lines, all the grid lines should come normally, that is a normal border that we use. Sometimes we want that only the grid lines for the rows will appear, or we want only the grid lines for the columns will appear, or we want that grid lines between the three groups will appear. Like we just discussed that you have three groups of rows, you can create the groups using T head, T body and T footer. So you want that the lines will only come to demarcate these three groups. So you can see in this example here different types of rules. So you specify this by specifying the attribute rules for the table, and the first says rules is equal to rows. So you can see in the first table only the lines or the grid lines for the rows are shown. In the second it says table 2, it says rules is equal to calls. So only the line between the two columns is coming. The third table 3 says rules is equal to all. So in that case all the grid lines are being shown, and table 4 says rules is equal to groups. So it is demarcating them only in the groups, that is a line is coming between table head and body, and then another line is coming between body and footer. So how do you specify this? The coding is along with the table you specify. So we write table, and it is important to specify the border attribute here. So we write table border is equal to 2, and then we write rules, the word is rules, and you specify either rows if you want only the rows, grid lines for the rows to appear. You write rules is equal to calls if you want that the grid lines for the columns should appear. You write rules is equal to all if you want all the grid lines to appear, and you write table border is equal to 2, rules is equal to groups if you want that the lines for only the groups should appear there. So we can see here that this is going to create a different experience of lines. You can design various elements on the website using this kind of a feature of the table rules. Now we come to another very important element of HTML, which we have seen very commonly in a large number of websites. You must have experienced that sometimes the websites, they show two different files at the same time, or they show links at one side of the page, and when you click on the links, the description of the link or the linked file will open on this area very next to the link itself. So the link does not open in a new window, but it opens on adjacent area of the link itself. So this kind of a facility is possible using frames in HTML. So this is known as frames. So frames are basically HTML's tools to show different HTML files simultaneously for the user. So at the same time, if the user wants to create, or if the designer wants that the user should be able to see two or more than two files, then the element or the HTML tag that is required is the frames tag. Now frames is actually a combination of tags that we will use. We will see how it is used to create frames on the web browser, right. So we see here that HTML frames are used to divide the browser window into multiple sections, where each section can load a separate HTML document. A collection of frames in the browser window is known as a frame set. the window is divided into frames in a similar way the tables are organized into rows and columns. So, actually the way we use tables to organize data into rows and columns, similarly we can use frames to organize data on the web browser screen using rows and columns, but the difference between table and frame is that a table is a single HTML file which is shown on the browser screen, but when you are using frames you are actually showing more than one HTML file at the same time on the browser screen. So, multiple content can be shown to the user at the same time if you are using frames in your HTML file. Now, there are various advantages which are discussed for the use of frames, because it gives a lot of flexibility to the user or to the designer to show the content. So, some of the advantages of using frames are that they can give more flexibility in designing the web presentation, a lot of different images and information in different web pages can be placed, which will reduce the redundancy or duplicacy on the web pages. They make the site easier to manage. It allows the designer to update only a few files rather than the whole website whenever an updation occurs. Then web designers advocate creating both framed and non-framed versions for website, giving users the option of which one to use. Now, this last point needs a bit of explanation, because a good number of browsers, a little older versions of browsers may occur which do not support frames. So, in that case what will happen is that if the browser a user is using does not support frames, then that person will not be able to see the website or will not be able to see the proper format and layout of the content of the web page, because the browser is not supporting frames. Therefore, it is advocated that any website which is developed using frames, another version of the same website should be there for those people who do not, whose browsers does not support the frames on the browser screen. So, it is sometimes said that two versions should be used. Nowadays, we have an alternative for this also that we will be discussing. So, we give a specific tag to the HTML page where frames are being used, so that if the browser the user is using is not supporting frames, then this particular message will be given to the user, so that the user can switch to another browser, because he will understand that the website he is trying to view contains frames which are not easily visible on his browser. The browser he is using is not supporting that functionality, so he may upgrade his browser or he may want to change his browser. So, a message is given to the user to avoid any kind of awkwardness. So, we see that in spite of the fact that the frames are providing a lot of flexibility to the designer, and it gives them ease of convenience of updating the website, etc., but still we see that sometimes frames, websites using frames are not that much liked by a few people who have a few other school of thought, and they say that there are certain disadvantages of frames also which must be kept in mind before websites are designed discreetly using frames. So, what are the disadvantages of using frames in a website? So, the main drawbacks of using frame is that the browser has to load multiple HTML files before a user can view the content of the site, increasing the waiting time for potential customers. So, any website which is having frames will take much longer to load, because multiple files are being loaded. Instead of just one web page, it is more than two web pages which are being loaded. So, if it is a slow internet connection, then this may create unnecessary waiting time for the viewer, which may sometimes lead a bad impression on the customers of the, or on the viewers, on the visitors of the website. Then some smaller devices. Nowadays we see that a large number of people, they are viewing websites on their smartphones or on their tablets or things like this. So, these smaller devices, sometimes they have a very small viewing area or a display area. So, they may not show the information in frames properly. So they are not able to cope with frames because their screen is not big enough to be divided up. So they are not able to show it properly. Then sometimes the page will be displayed differently on different computers due to different screen resolution. Then the browser's back button might not work as the user hopes because the frames, they are individual documents. So if you are on one document, you can easily go back, but if you are on multitude of documents at the same time, you may not have the option of going back so easily. And there are still few browsers, as I just said, that do not support the frame functionality. So for such people, using frames may become a little difficult and cumbersome. So we say that the discretion of designing a website using frames or without frames is entirely a choice of the designer. It has its own pros and cons which the designer must keep in mind before using this particular element on the website. Anyhow, because web pages are, a large number of web pages are using the flexibility of frames and frame sets. So we will be discussing how a web page can be designed with the use of Frameset and frame tags. So we will see that this is an example which you see of a frame layout sketch. So you can see here that the same web page has been divided into 3 parts, and the first part is showing the title of the web page, and then you have 2 vertical sections of the web page. One is which has the links, and the other, as I just discussed, is having the descriptions. So this way you can see that how frames are created on web page. This is just an example layout. We will be discussing more of these cases. Now actually, when you try to create a frame, the first thing that you have to create is a frame set. So a frame set basically refers to the collection of the frames on the web page. So you create a frame set, you use a frame set tag to create a frame set. Within a frame set you can define frames, and in each frame you will load a separate HTML document. So the first tag which you use is a frame set tag. So a frame set describes how the frames are organized. They are defined by rows or columns, but not both. The designer must choose to lay out the frames in either rows or columns. To create a frame layout, you will use the rows and calls attribute of the frame set tag, and the rows attribute creates a rows of frames. The calls attribute creates a column of frames. So actually you can divide your browser screen horizontally into rows, or you can divide it vertically into columns. But it is important to note that with the frame set tag you either define it as rows or you define it as calls, but not both at the same time. So you can see here that the important tags which are used for creating frames, there are 3 tags that are very critical. First is the frame set and the /frame set tag, that is the closing frame set is also specified. Then we have the tag called frame. So frame is an empty tag which need not be closed, which is not closed, which does not have a corresponding closing tag. And then we have the no frame tag. So no frame and /no frame tag, that we will see how it is used for specifying or giving a message to the user who is using a browser that does not support the frames. So the no frame tag can be used for such users. So first thing that we see is how you can create a frame set. So for creating a frame set, the frame set tag is used to store the definitions of the various frames in the file. These definitions will typically include the size and location of the frame, include the web pages the frame will display. The frameset code does not include an opening and closing body tag. The reason for this is that this HTML file displays the contents of other web pages. Technically, it is not a web page. So it is very important to understand that whenever you are using a frameset tag in your HTML file, you will not put a body tag. because when you put a body tag, it considers it to be a single HTML file. But when you are using a frame set, you are actually not having a single web page, but this web page is showing multitude of HTML files, 3 or 2 or 3 or 4 files maybe. So therefore, whenever you are using the frame set tag, you will not use the body tag. So you only straight away use HTML. Head, if you want to specify the title to your web page, you put a title, and then you write after the head tag closes, you will define the frame set tag. So directly you define the frame set tag. So here you can see an example, that is how a web page has been divided into 3 rows. So these are 3 rows which the web page has been divided, and each of the rows has a separate HTML file. So you can see the first is a.html file, the second is b.html file, and the third is c.html file, or these could be any chapter 1, chapter 2, introduction, or any file in the HTML in the folder. Now we will see, if you want to create a structure like this on your web page, what are the HTML elements that you need to use. So you can see here. So the first is that you will have to define the frame set tag. So the syntax of the frame set tag, as you can see, is frame set, and if you want to define the rows, you write rows is equal to, and you define as many number of rows as you want the screen to be divided into, or you want to divide into columns. So you write frame set and you write calls is equal to, and you specify as many number of columns as you want to, call 1, call 2, call 3, and so on and so forth, and then you close the frame set tag. So frame set basically defines a collection of frames. So the main attribute of the frame set tag is calls or rows, as I just told you. So rows and calls are used only one at a time. So either you can use a frame set that divides the page into rows, or you can use a frame set that divides your page into columns, but not both in the same frame set tag. And besides this, we will be discussing other attributes also of the frame set tag, like border, border color, style, frame border, frame spacing, and other attributes also. So we shall be continuing our discussion with frame sets in a short while. Thank you.
So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us this session. Friends, there is a lot more for you in store. So you're requested to be with us as we are back after a short break. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome back to this session. Friends, as you know that today we are talking on web designing using HTML, and for the discussion on the topic we have with us in our studios Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj. Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj is Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science, CEC in Mary College, University of Delhi. So let's welcome our guest Dr. Bharadwaj once again, and let's try to understand more. Hello ma'am, welcome to the lecture.
So we were talking about frame sets, and we were seeing how a web page can be divided, or the screen on the browser can be divided into 2 or more sections, either horizontally or vertically, and each of that section can be made to show or display a separate web page. So we were seeing that we can either divide using the Frameset tag, we can either divide the page in rows or we can divide it using calls. So when you are using the Frameset tag and you want to divide your page into rows or into columns, so there are two ways in which you can do that. So you have to specify the size of the columns or the rows that you are defining. So when you are trying to show the size, that is how much each column or how much each row has to be, you have two options for doing that. One is using pixels, so you can define absolute pixels that you want like 100, 200, 300, or you can use variables. So in this case you can see in the example we have defined pixel rows like 100, 200, 100. So in this means that the first row will be of 100 pixels, the second will be of 200 pixels and the third will be of 100 pixels, or you can define using variable size. So in this case the first and the third row will be of 20 pixels and the second row will be the remaining. So in this case star means whatever is left will be given to the second row. Or the other way is to divide into rows or columns using the percentage of the screen area. So you can define like 25%, 50% or 25%. So this means that the three rows will be, first will be 25%, the second will be 25 and the third will be 50%. Or you can have variable rows in percentage also, so you can define 10%, 20% and star. So this means that the two rows will be as defined and the third row will be the remaining, that is it will be the star. So specifying a frame source. So when you are trying to specify a frame source, what do you need? So to specify a frame source within the frame set, you use the frame tag. So you use the frame set, inside the frame set you will use the frame tag. So in the frame tag you have the syntax like you give the source of the frame. So you write frame src and you give the URL. So URL is the file name and location of the page that you want to load in your page or on this particular frame. So you must insert the frame tag between the opening and the closing frame set tag. So we will just see an example how this is created. So here I am showing you an example by which we are creating two rows in the frame. So you can see I have used HTML head, then you can use the title, then after the head there is no body, as you can see I have not given the body tag, and I simply write frame set rows is equal to star comma star. So this star comma star here means that the screen will be divided into two rows of equal size, and then for each of the rows I will give a frame tag. So if there are two rows that I have created, I will use 2 times the frame tag, and for each frame that I am creating I will specify the source. So I specify the source, I write src and then I give the URL or the name of the file. This we had discussed earlier also, that sometimes if the file is in the same folder, you only have to give the name of the file. This is known as relative referencing. But if you are trying to load a file into your frame which is not in this particular folder or is a remote file, then you will have to specify the complete path or you will have to give the absolute reference. So anyhow, here we are using only the file name because these files a.html and b.html are in the same folder. Then you close the frame set and you close the HTML. So this way you can see that if I had created 3 rows using the frame set rows is equal to say star comma star comma star, then I would have used 3 frame tags, frame src and frame src. So as many rows or as many columns you will create, for each of the frame that you are creating, you will have a separate frame tag and you will put a URL for each of those files. So this is a simple example of a frame set or a simple frame. But as I told you that we are saying again and again that when you are using a frame set, you cannot create both rows and columns in the same Frameset tag. So what if there is a situation where you want to represent your data which has the screen has to be divided both into rows as well as column. The layout of the page is such that you want one row and two columns, or two rows and one column, and so on. So in that case, what we need to do is we need to create a nesting of the Frameset. So the word nesting here means that one Frameset tag will contain another Frameset in it. So it is known as nesting of Framesets. So you can see that a Frameset is defined by rows or columns, but not both. So to create frames using both rows and columns, one Frameset must be nested inside the other Frameset. The interpretation of the rows and cols attributes changes slightly. For example, a row height of 25% does not mean 25% of the display area, but rather 25% of the height of the frame into which that row has been inserted or nested. So basically, when you are using nesting of Framesets, the sizing element will vary a little bit. Rest is that within one Frameset you specify, instead of a frame, you specify that there is another Frameset in it. So this is how we use the nesting of Frameset. So you can see here that we have created another HTML file where we specify in the first Frameset we are dividing the page into two rows. So we write Frameset rows is equal to star comma star. So this is going to create two rows on the screen of equal size. Then the first row will have the file a.html loaded onto it, and the second row, instead of specifying the URL of the file, we are saying that the second row is actually divided into two columns. So instead of putting a frame tag there, we have put a Frameset tag there, and we are writing Frameset cols is equal to star comma star. So we are actually dividing the second row into two equal sized columns, and then for each of these columns we are specifying a separate HTML file. So we can see, and then we close the second Frameset and then the outer Frameset. So you can see that this sort of a design structure is known as nesting, because one Frameset comes under another Frameset. So the output of this file will be something like this. You can see here that we have divided the screen into two rows first, and the second row is then divided into two columns. So you can see at the same time this document is showing, this web page is showing three files, one in the first row, second in the second row first column, and third in the second row second column. So three files can be seen simultaneously using nesting of Frameset. So the limitation of the Frameset, where we were discussing that only rows or only columns can be shown, has been covered up using this technique. Then besides this, the frames, there are other attributes which you can also specify for your frames, like you can use a lot of formatting elements among the frames, and you can design or you can control the appearance of scroll bars or the resizing of the frames to be done by the user, etc. So for each of these, the frame tag has its own attributes. So we will now discuss a few important attributes that are used with the frame tag. So the frame tag, the first attribute that is used is the src attribute, which we have already seen is used to display to give the URL or the name of the file which you want to display within the frame. Then we give the ID, or we give a name for the frame for later reference. We will be seeing that this attribute is very important because you want to identify each of the frames that you have created for certain purposes. Then the appearance of scroll bars within the frames can be controlled. If you want the scroll bars or if you do not want the scroll bars, there are specific attributes which you can specify. Then the size of the margin between the source document and the frame border. The border size can be controlled, and the margin height and the margin width can be controlled, and also whether we want the user to be allowed to change the size or to resize the frames on his or her respective browser window. So, we will see how each of these attributes of the frame tag will be used. So, the first attribute, as we had seen, is the frame src. So, in frame src attribute, you specify the URL of the file that you want to load in that particular frame, and you give the name to a frame. Any name can be given, that is the choice of the designer to the frame. Then if you want the scroll bars to appear or to not appear, then the attribute that you give with the frame is scrolling attribute. So, there are three options that you can give for this. First is whether you want that the scroll bars should appear at all times. Actually, scroll bars are required only when the content of the file is longer than the display area of the screen. So, you want a scroll bar so that the user can scroll down and view the complete content. So, you can either give a yes if you want the scroll bars to always be there. You can give a no if you do not want the scroll bars to be there, because your page has only that much content which can be shown to the user in the first area of the screen only. You need not go down or scroll down. Or you can give another option like auto. Auto means that the scrolling will appear if the browser sees that there is a need for a scroll bar, or otherwise it will not put. So, auto means the browser will automatically decide whether there is a requirement or not. So, we can see that by default scroll bars are displayed when the content of the source page cannot fit within the frame. So, we can override the default setting by specifying the attribute scrolling, and you can give scrolling is equal to yes, scrolling is equal to no, or you can give scrolling is equal to auto. Then we can also specify we can set the size of the margin of the frame. The margin is the area between the edge of the screen and the content of the page. So, the margin of the screen can be set using two different attributes of the frame. So, we must always consider that the browser determines the amount of space between the content of the page and the frame border. Occasionally, the browser sets the margin between the border and the content which is too large, and the margin should also be big enough to keep the source text or images from running into the frame borders. So, the margin should not take up too much space, because you typically want to display as much of the source as possible. So, it is very important to understand that the margin space which is specified along with the frame is very critical. Either it should neither be too large and it should nor be too small, so that the optimum view of the content can be provided and the screen space can be used in the best possible manner. So, to specify the size of the margins, there are two attributes which are used. The first is margin height and the second is margin width. So, margin height is the amount of space in pixels above and below the content of the page in the frame, and margin width is the amount of space to the left and right. So, basically margin height you can specify the top and bottom margins, and margin width will help you specify the size of the left and right margins of your page, of your frame. So, if you specify only one, the browser assumes that you want to use the same value for both. Setting the margin values is a process of trial and error as you determine what combination of margin size looks best. So, this is you try and then you get to know that what is the best margin size that you want. So, we will see how you actually specify the margin width and the margin height. So, you can see here. So, here we are using a nested frame set. So, you can see frame set rows divides the frame set into two rows of equal size. Then the first row is divided into two columns. The first column is a frame which has the file d.html, and the second we are defining the margin width and margin height both have been put to 50 pixels, and of course the source has been given. Then there is another important element which you should pay attention to here, that in the third frame that is being created, an element is defined where no resize has been written. So, we write frame src, you can give the name of the file, of course that is the source element, and then we are specifying the word no resize. So, no resize will mean that the frame size cannot be changed. With the help of the mouse, the user or the viewer of the website cannot make changes. So, you can see the output of this file is something like this. So, the frame width, the margin height and margin width will give some space along the margin of the frame. You can see the white space which is shown here is the margin width and the margin height, and the third, the row which you are seeing where you can see this is f.htm document chapter 5, this is a no resize frame, that is the size of this frame cannot be adjusted. So, you can see here that this is showing 3 documents at the same time, but there is a margin which is coming. This margin has been added using the margin height and margin width attributes. So, we have seen that no resize can be specified so that the frame borders cannot be just dragged. Some web designers prefer to freeze or lock the frame so that users cannot resize them. This ensures that the website displays as the designer intends it to be displayed at all times. So, we write no resize is equal to no resize. So, it is always given with the frame tag. No resize attribute is always given with the frame tag. So, this will freeze your frame's size and no user will be allowed to change the size if you give this attribute. Then while discussing HTML, HTML anchor tag, we had talked about a very important element of the anchor tag, which is the target. So, we had seen that the A tag or the tag which is used for creating hyperlinks has an attribute called target. So, target will do what? It will open the file, the linked file at a specific portion. Now, this can be used to design very effective websites when you are having frames. So, in this case what can be done is that one file will contain the hyperlinks and it is put in one of the frames, and the hyperlinks can be targeted to the other frame of the screen. So, when you click on the link in one frame, the linked file will open in the other frame. So, this kind of a structure can be created using frames, which allows the users to view the links as well as the linked file at the same time, and it does not allow the user to have to go and click the back button again and again to go back to the links and look for the link and then click for the second file. So, this is a very effective way of doing it. So, frames are used for creating this kind of a linking structure among the HTML pages. So, when you click on a link by default, the linked file opens inside the same frame. So, you can display hyperlinks in other ways also, like if you want to display it in a different frame or in a new window or in the entire window on the same web page. So, when you want to control the behavior of links in a framed page, there are 2 required steps. Give each frame on the page a name, as I just told you that the frame, with the frame tag, the name attribute must always be specified, and then the hyperlink that is being used should point to the named frame. So, you will use the target attribute of the anchor tag to target the linked file to the particular frame. So, you have named the frame. In the target you will put the name of the frame so that the file will open in the linked page. So, to assign a name to the frame, we add the name attribute to the frame tag. So, we have seen that the syntax is simple. You write frame source is equal to, you give the URL and you give the name to the frame. You can give any name to the frame that you want. Now, this is a kind of structure that I have been talking about. in this you can see that the screen is showing two frames, two vertical frames are being shown here. The first frame on the left hand side shows the main menu which contains 6 links, and the right hand side frame displays the file which is linked to each of these. So, when the user clicks on introduction, the introduction files displays in the right hand side frame. When the user clicks on chapter 1, the linked file of chapter 1 will open in the right hand side frame, and so on. So, we will see how this kind of a structure can be created. So, for this what you actually need to do is that we need to create the first file where we are putting all the frames. So, we will create a main file where the frames are being designed. That is a simple file that we want. It is a simple frame set which has 2 vertical frames, 2 row column frames, and the first frame will have the main menu.html file, and the second frame can have any of the linked file, because later on all the files are being targeted to the second frame only. So, initially any file can be loaded, and then for each of the links, of course, there is a linked file which has been created. So, we will see how the coding of this is done. So, you can see here this is the file main menu.html which has all the links, and you can see it is written ahref. You write the file, the URL of the file that you want to open, and then you write the name of the frame. Here we are writing target is equal to textos, because textos is the name of the frame in which we want the file to open. So, when the user will click on the text introduction, the file a.html will open in the frame called textos. Similarly, it will happen for all the other HTML files of all the other hyperlinks, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all these are hyperlinks. Each of these when clicked, the linked file will open in the frame called textos. So, we will see how the frame set has been defined. So, this is the file which is showing the frame set. So, you can see we have defined a frame set calls 30% comma star. So, the first frame on the left hand side is a narrow frame which is only using 30% of the area. The rest of the area is for the right hand side frame which will show the contents. The first frame has the file menu and the source has been given, and the second frame's name is textos. So, you can see here the name textos has been given. So, all the files that will be linked, all the hyperlinks have been targeted to this frame textos. So, when the user will click any of those hyperlinks, the linked file will open in the frame textos. So, this way we can specify a target to the frame. So, the main attribute of the A tag is the target attribute. So, the target attribute actually decides where the linked file will open, and this has special significance when you are talking about hyperlinks and when you want to open the linked file at a specific location. So, you may want the linked file to open in a new window, or you may want the linked file to open in the parent frame, or you may want the linked file to open in the same frame where the link is, etc. So, for that we give the options to the user using the target attribute. So, target attribute gives the user the flexibility to open the file at in a specific frame, and the syntax is simple. Along with the A tag, you specify target and you give the name. So, like in the previous case, in the example that we were discussing, you can just simply give the name of the frame where you want the file to open, so the file will open. So, besides this, when you want the target to be opened in some other file, then there are some reserved words which can also be given. So, these reserved target names are special names that can be used in place of a frame name as a target. So, there we had used the name of a frame like textos. Now, we want these reserved names to be used for specific locations where we want the linked file to open. So, these are useful in situations where we want the name of the frame is unavailable, or you want the page to appear in a new window, or you want the page to replace the current browser window. So, all reserved target names begin with an underscore character to distinguish them from other target names. So, whenever you will see that target is equal to underscore, it means that the linked file is going to open at a reserved frame name or at a reserved target name which has been given. So, these are always, it is important to remember that these are given in lower case and these are case sensitive. This rule applies for all HTML file names also, that is the file names are all case sensitive, otherwise HTML is not case sensitive, but whenever you are specifying the URL you must pay attention to the case of the file name. So, any file name which is specified, the name should be in the same case in which the file has been saved, because HTML distinguishes case in case of file names. So, here you can see that 4 target names are used, these are reserved target names. So, if we write target is equal to underscore blank, so it will load the target document into a new browser window. If we write target is equal to underscore self, then it will load the target document into the frame which is containing the link, into the same frame where the link is, the linked file will also open. If you write target is equal to underscore parent, it loads the target document into the parent of the frame containing the link, that is into the main, into the frame set above it. And if you write target is equal to underscore top, it loads the document into the full display area replacing the current frame layout. So, on the same window the file will open and all the frame structure will be removed and you will see only the linked file is there. So, all these targets can be, target reserved words can be used for this purpose. So, here you can see this is a file where we are using multiple frames. So, if we are saying that X will load it into a new window, or it will load into the original position, or it will load at the top depending on the case. So, you can see here if I write target is equal to underscore blank, so the file will be loaded into a new window. If I write target is equal to trio, that is the name of the frame, so the file opens into the frame. If I write target is equal to underscore top, then it loads the file into the master frame set, that is above the frame set, and the display of the frame sets will be overwritten. So, besides this we can also use the no frames tag. So, the no frame tag, as we had discussed, will allow the user of a browser which does not support the HTML frames to see a message that the website is not showing appropriately because it is using frames. So, we can use the frames and the no frames tags. You can see here in the coding we can write simply frameset, frames, whatever frames are used that can be given, and along with that we specify the no frames tag, and we write in the body, we write that this document requires a frame capable browser, then we close the body and we write close the no frames tag. Now, the reason why body has been specified along the no frames is because this will enable all the browsers to read it. If this is not specified, then the browser which does not support frames will also not be able to read the no frames tag. So, once it comes in body, it can be recognized by all the browsers, and the browsers that support frames will obviously ignore the no frames tag and display the content in the form of frames itself. So, we have discussed today a lot about tables and also important features about creating HTML frames. So, we will be continuing on HTML in the future lectures also. Till then, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us this session. Friends, we know that you have lots of queries and the feedback to give to us. So, do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. We will be meeting soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.